Hey guys, it's Matt. It is the RYLA Routine, episode 22, and I have the amazing Brett Brough with me. Brett from the Tulsa Southside Rotary Club. Brett has done a lot of things through Rotary that I've had the opportunity to engage with him in. But my absolute favorite, most joyful thing I get to do with Brett is RYLA for District 6110. Brett, how are you today?
I am awesome as always.
He is awesome. Brett, for sake of conversation, let's jump into it. How did you get to Rotary?
How'd I get into Rotary?
Yeah.
Well, I was asked, I was proposed by somebody, but the real backstory is when I was a young kid, I grew up in Estes Park, a small community in the mountains of Colorado. My grandfather owned a supermarket and he was the mayor. And I later found out he was the president of his Rotary Club in 1947,
Oh
48.
wow.
And so as a youngster, I would get around Rotarians. And I mean, pretty small. I remember kind of Boy Scouting, post Cub Scouts, early Boy Scouts. And Rotarians always supported. But could I tell you what they did? Who they were, what they were about? Not a clue. But what
Yeah.
I knew was Rotarians supported.
When you got
So
to when you got to Tulsa and Rotary, where you were proposed for membership, was it here in Tulsa?
it was here in Tulsa. It was by a longtime Rotarian in our club invited me to come. I told him I was interested because of my grandfather. I still didn't know what I was getting into. And that was February of 1999. So I'm about 25 years deep in
Wow.
Rotary.
Well, congratulations on your 25 years of service, and I know many have been impacted by that service. When you think back, when it comes to RYLA, how do you remember how you got to know about RYLA?
The club talked about it, but we never really did anything. What is RYLA? Well, it's a leadership camp, and we can send juniors, and they'll go to camp, and it's a great thing. I'm like, okay. So life goes on. We got involved at McLean High School in 2013, 2012, maybe, and we did a project together with McLean to put a greenhouse up there. And it was done with a lady who joined our club. Her name was Gwen Goff. Son of a gun, was she awesome. And then she passed away. Well, like 2 years in our club, she had a stroke. It was pretty bad. And a couple of us said we need to keep servicing McLean, and so we did. And we started talking about RYLA. We said, well, we should probably send some students to RYLA. So we rounded up some McLean students and we sent them, and it was a good experience. The next year, we sent more kids, and before we know it, we're involved in 2 Interact clubs. And we're certainly not Mike Addington, but we've been consistent somewhere between 12 and 15 students per year between Union High School and McLean High School. That
McLean's McLean's 13. At what point does Union get into the fold?
about 14, maybe 15.
Okay.
They were they were right behind us. Some Rotarians had students at Union, and they sent their kids to RYLA. They came back and said, well, that Matt Hancock guy is always talking about Interact. Where's our Interact club? And all of a sudden, we're in the middle of trying to figure out how to do an Interact club because these students came back from RYLA and said, we want to have an Interact club. So we've been at Union for 10 years and McLean, I think, for 11.
Congratulations.
So
That's awesome. What
it's
do
a big
you,
deal.
I mean, the challenge, and I know it's not all puppy dogs and kittens with Interact. One of the greatest challenges that Interact faces is change of staff, and hopefully you don't have a change of Rotarian at the same time. But you've been very loyal and very committed to youth and Rotary through Interact and RYLA, as well as supporting Youth Exchange and all the other youth programs that I know Rotary has in our district. What's the is it that sponsor matters, right? And you've done a remarkable job when you get the right sponsor, getting that sponsor to come to camp and hang out with us. What are some things? Maybe what are some of the challenges with Interact? I mean, not everything has to be positive. I mean, I think you and Michael Addington both. Mike talked about some of You know, like, yeah, numbers, 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 and it all seems to come back to the sponsor. Would you agree with that?
The sponsor is crucial, and the Rotary relationship created with that sponsor is equally crucial.
Yeah,
At McLean, I've seen some big changes in McLean over the last 10 years, but they're using Teach for America students who are coming right out of college and going into teaching right to McLean. And I believe for 2 years service, they get a huge reduction in any student debt that they might
yeah,
have carried to get their degree, which I think is absolutely awesome. But what it creates is turnover.
yeah,
So um, one there's two things that are really crucial. The kids got to like that sponsor. If they don't like the faculty advisor that we get, they're not going to be fired up about doing anything with that person.
yeah,
So they tend to like at McLean, they like the Teach for America teachers because they're closer to their age and I think are more relatable at
uh-huh,
an age level. And so we've had very good success with the Teach for America students, but they're gone in 2 to 3 years. Right now, we're
yeah,
with a teacher that has been with us for 3 years, and I believe she's staying on for the next year. She's been to camp. We had another senior teacher, and by senior, I mean she was very close to retirement. Marcia Campbell came to camp a couple of years and brought students
yep,
from McLean High School. Marcia had a blast, and had she not retired, I think we'd have seen her again. And the kids loved Marcia. Um, the young people love Jillian Sweats right now.
yeah,
Um, the other challenge that you have with Interact is really the same challenge that clubs have with a college Rotaract. And that is you got 3 to 4 years to interact with these students, and then the seniors are out and you're needing new leadership and you're replenishing the club every year. And you're
yeah.
starting literally from zero in September to rebuild that organization. So um, we've come up with some strategies, and I'm about to put one of them into play right now. We're getting to the end of the school year when you're talking to me. And so I'm going to be giving RYLA applications
Yep.
to some of the uh, sophomores that are going to be juniors and having them pre-apply with me. You won't see any of that information until we get down the
Sure.
roadways, but I want to get them identified.
That's
I
a
think
that's a good point. I mean, that's a really good point. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I do want to plug like in the past, I've been a little reluctant to put out things early, because unfortunately not everybody's a Brett. People will sit on it and I'm like, okay, did it even matter? But people like you and people like Mike that say, hey, if you'll get to these kids before school gets out, it's a whole lot easier. I would be really excited to hear how this goes because May 1st we'll drop that student application, and I would venture to say you're probably onto something.
um, yeah, if you, I don't care whether you drop an application or not, I'm creating one. And it's going to get the information that Matt's going to need
Yeah,
anyway. But
yeah,
what I'm looking for really is name, address, email, phone number, phone number, parent email, so that
yeah,
we can kind of start a gentle conversation during the summer. But I'm also recruiting to move them forward into the Interact Club,
yeah.
so we have those youngsters to work with there. If there's not an Interact Club, we'll take a student anyway,
Hmm.
but then we're going to try and work really hard to get them co-sponsored, or we call it fostering in my club, get them
Yeah.
sponsored by another Rotary club that could stand up an Interact Club in that school. So, so
What do you go ahead?
I just see this. As a Rotarian, I see this as a very long game to play.
Yeah,
Um,
I had
we
a conversation with Pam Crawford. I think it was Pam and I talking recently, and that was the conversation that she stated. She stated, well, Brett said it's the long game, and Brett, I mean, I when I did my RYLA routine with Tommy Jane here a couple weeks back, I sat here and started really thinking through, like, in advance of that conversation. in 2013 or 2012 when Tracy and I kind of step into the fold. Here we are 14 years later, and you have Daniel Dunham stand up as a president-elect at Pets, and you have people like Z Young, who's written a book, and you've got as an author and doing podcasts, and like you've got some people that are these kids that, and I say this, they're kids, they are kids. I'm 41, and there's these kids that came along at 17 years old that are now turning 30, and these people are having kids. They've got families, and they're out doing good in the communities they serve. And Sand Springs Chamber is a perfect example, Brett. I was at a meeting. I'll tell you what it was. It was Amanda Wyon. So Amanda, back in the fall, reached out and said, "Hey, want to come back and serve, dot, dot, dot." She was a camper from Henrietta, Oklahoma, and came back and served as a chaperone. And she says, "Hey, would you be willing to come over to Sand Springs and speak to like leadership Sand Springs for their first session and talk about thumbprint, talk about diversity, bingo, and stuff like that?" I said, "Absolutely." And so as I start having a conversation with her, again, she came to campus 17, and now she's the chamber president, Sand Springs, Oklahoma. It is the long game, because kids come to us, they have their senior year, maybe they come back and serve, but some of the young men and young ladies that we make an impact on, many, we actually never get to see the end game, because they go back to a community like us as leaders in RYLA. They go back to Flippin, Arkansas, and the local Rotarian keeps in touch maybe, but we don't necessarily as a district get to see and touch that. But I can tell you, as I digested that, I was like, okay, it is the long game. It's not, some kids we can, I hate to use the word save, some kids we can save as a 17-year-old and give them a good foundation at camp and help them be more successful as a young man or young lady at 18. But those kind of things take a while. Ron Harris can say one thing, or I can say one thing, or you can say one thing, and that one thing may click and resonate, but it has to come with some change, and habits have to change, and that takes a while.
Yeah, well, and it takes discipline, it takes personal desire. Here's the punchline for me, Matt, and you do this at camp, and I do it with interactors. When we get the kids all in one big room, and I know you do it early at the camp, you ask them a simple question. How many of you were in your hometown in third grade, and how many of you got a dictionary? And it is stunning the number of hands that we see get into the air saying, "Hey, I got a dictionary in third grade." I do it with the Interact clubs. Who got a dictionary? A lot of hands come up, particularly if they were in that school system when they were in third grade. Well, so we've gone from 8 years old to 16, 17 years old, and really haven't had a lot of interaction, but they remember the dictionary. So we at least played a touchdown. We got that. Now we've waited and captured them again. And then what happens after RYLA? Well, it goes silent again. If they don't have a place to go and take the skills that RYLA delivers, and I'm stunned at how similar camps are and their delivery between districts. I think we have one of the greatest camps in the country in 6110, and that's because of you and Tracy and Ron and the team that you've had around you for years. But it's going on everywhere. And we have another RYLA alumni, interactor and rotaractor in Adriana Grable, who is the president of the Jinx Club for a second year. And she's a great example of a young person who got an Interact experience, got a RYLA experience, got a Rotary experience in Rotaract, and wanted to be in Rotary, and is now a club president like Daniel will be. There are more of those that we've grown and lost track of because we're not Mike Addington. And I mean, I'm amazed. Mike can tell you stories about every kid he's brought to camp.
Well, you look at an Angel Harris, or you look at like Laura Gray is a great example. I mean, Laura's doing remarkable work, right? It may not be in Rotary. Like I know I selfishly want everybody to join the Y and everybody to join Rotary. Like, join the Y first, because that's how my family gets fed. And secondly, join Rotary. Like, and both of them, the sheer reality of it is, you know, the Y is not for everybody, and neither is Rotary. Some people can't do a
Right.
noon meeting. Some people can't do an evening meeting. I'm very impressed with the E Club and what I know, some differing opinions of like, well, so they actually don't meet. Well, but we're keeping people engaged. It's engagement. It's a club of engagement. Like, there's people that want that time together. Um, and so I just think, I think you're right. There's so many of those stories and so many of those kids that have come to camp that maybe, it,
Well,
we so
let me go
often are
down
like,
another youth path with you though, Matt. We do the same thing to international exchange students.
yeah,
We give them this incredible experience, and they hang out with Rotarians for a year who take care of them, see to them, see that they get where they've got to be, see that they've got the needs that they have for the part of the world that they're in. And we bring them back, and it's crickets.
yeah,
So if I were saying anything to Rotarians, let alone what I'll say to RYLA students, is bug the Rotarians and stay on them. But I'd say to Rotarians, get in the long game, man, because these are young people that you've already impacted.
yeah,
And if we don't continue to impact them, they'll go do great things.
sure,
But could they do great things with us?
yeah. Could they make? I mean, it's a power of numbers thing. It's a numbers game. If there's 15 of us working towards a common goal, if that's, water, erratic water, polio, if it's food, whatever. If there's 15 of us versus 15 can obviously make a much greater impact. And as an organization, especially in 6110, when you look at the communities we have, we've got some remarkable Rotary clubs in our district. We really do. And we've also got about 20 clubs that don't send kids to camp. And I know I'm going to spend an inordinate amount of time starting May 1st with our leadership team to really reach out and say, hey, we know who has and hasn't sent kids to camp for the past 14 years. It's not a hidden fact. I can go in and pull when it comes to deduping lists and things like that. We're going to be able to say this club hasn't supported it. So we're going to have some critical conversations and say, why aren't we supporting it? Is it a lack of knowledge? Because if it's a lack of knowledge, Brett Brough could support your club in increasing knowledge. If it's a lack of funds, okay, maybe it's Michael Addington could support that, because Michael Addington at one time was bringing 6 kids, and he went out and said, I'm just going to keep raising money, and he's figured that out. If it's I don't have anybody that can come back and reinvigorate the club, and I need somebody to do a program. Okay, anybody can go do a program. I can give you a PowerPoint and anybody can go. I'm going to Parsons, Kansas next month, which I didn't understand how far up in the north Parsons was from Sky to when I said yes. But I'm glad I said yes, because they've sent 2 kids for the past 10 years. Every year, 2 kids. Like, okay, how much would it pay you to send a third one or a fourth one? Is it the $600, or is it just the fact that we check a box every year and go, we sent 2 kids? And I think that's a great thing about Brett as a person, is Brett's willing to challenge what's today for what's better tomorrow, and knows that it may take us a little while to get there. And that's okay, because year one, we're talking 113 kids, and here we get to the beginning of 2019, and 373 campers at camp, and we're going to get back to that number. But that's a long game. I knew I couldn't go at 70 different clubs and just beat them over the head with RYLA before I knew what RYLA was, and before I had people like yourself that love helping people and love supporting youth alongside me to be able to make sure that the voice was bigger.
Well, and again, I'm going to do this for Rotarians and RYLA students, RYLA alumni can hear this, because I think it's really important. I didn't become president of my club until I got involved and actively thinking about RYLA. I didn't get invited to participate at a district level, and I've been an assistant governor and an assistant governor coordinator over the last 6 years. That didn't happen until I got involved with RYLA. What I didn't realize was, and I go to camp not just for the kids, but I go to camp for me, because who can't use a bonus leadership skill? And what Ron Harris provides in terms of leadership skills, what Matt Hancock provides in terms of leadership skills, what chaperones learn in a hands-on environment about leadership skills is untouchable, Matt. Not not going to RYLA would be me skipping my Rotary Fellowship course
Yeah.
and not getting the Beyond Rotary. How do you impact lives? Well, you can't do it sitting at home watching football games.
No.
And I don't mean to pick on people who like football or baseball or basketball or whatever that is, but impacting lives is done in the field.
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, it's so true. It's the people that are willing to take that extra step. And then again, it creates that long game. I mean, it's not Brett wanting to be the Rotary guru for 6110 or the Rotary guru for the district. It's Brett wants to serve one more person. And I think that's when Rotarians look at it in that context. I mean, John Rains and I have had a lot of conversations about the time he spent Rotary projects and different Rotary projects, and he constantly says, I wish 10 years ago I would have known.
I'm glad I
You know,
found out 10 years ago.
yeah. And so I think there's people, I don't want to be, I'd hate to be the best kept secret for a Rotarian. And I think that I know that here in the next, I mean, purposefully from May 1st until August 1st, the gas pedal is going to, that's why I opened up staff applications 2 months earlier is like, I want to be able to put the foot down, I want not the staff piece. The staff piece I can handle and handle really well. I want to be able to put the foot down, not on chaperones. I want to be able to put the foot down on the local Rotary Club to say, are we doing enough to create a foundation of change in our community that will be long-term committed change?
Well, give me
That
my
will.
assignments. At June 30th, I'm off of assistant governor roles. So, so
Well,
I bought some time back.
it's not a light switch, right? I mean, camp can be fun, right? We can talk about camp all day long, and fun can be a byproduct. And I joke with people all the time and tell clubs, and I've told Southside multiple times, you want kids to have fun, send them with Six Flags. You know, change a kid's life, send them right. That's my fact, you know? And so I think that matters so much. A couple of questions here as we wrap up. Like, I know you mentioned the Rotary Fellowship, but like, why do you keep coming back? Like, what's the real, if somebody said, Brett, why do you give Matt five? And I say that, why do you give Matt? Because that's how I receive it. I receive it as you have confidence in me and trust in me that you believe in what we're doing. You're not there to babysit me, and I'm not there to babysit you. Why do you take 5 days annually where you could do other things and do what you do for those 5 days?
I think it's a simple answer, but I'm sitting here digesting that question, Matt. Um, there's an I am unaware of another place I could go and be guaranteed that if I do my role at camp correctly, I will impact and see change in young people in 4 days. Not a lot of places you can go do that.
Right.
And this one's harder for me to say. Every time I go back to camp, one of the leadership comes up and says to me, I've been thinking all year about what you said. And I'll go, okay, what did I say? And I have to be reminded of what it was I did, because I just do it.
Yeah.
And that is gratifying at a very personal level, that just being me impacts somebody else. And I get to see that change year after year after year after year.
When you look at camp itself and you look at your time at camp, do you have any moments that stick out that are like that was awesome? That's where I got the bug per se. Was there anything like that?
Matt, every single year the camp is different, and every single year it's something different. And every single year it's an interaction with a young person you didn't expect.
No.
That in many cases, I don't know how they turned out. In other cases, I find out exactly how they turned out, and they're exactly what I had hoped they would
Sure.
be. You have to come to camp to get the experience. And the I've watched high schoolers come back and try to recruit others to go to camp, and they have the exact same problem I have. Camp is a very personal experience, and it's very difficult for me to convince you that you can have a very personal experience, but you have to come to camp.
Yeah. What is what's your favorite activity at camp? Like, do you have a favorite, like from the time you show up to the time you leave, you're like, man, I look forward to that.
I do look forward to the flag retirement ceremony every year. Um, that's probably something that's really consistent, and the impact is really consistent. Most students don't know what that means. They've never seen it. The going over the wall is always a big part of camp. But every day I'm at the point where I can pretty much tell you what your agenda is every day. Every day I can see the impact that camp is making on somebody. It may
Yeah.
not be the same student every day, but by the time we're done, the process that you and Ron engage in is so clear. There is no doubt that we're going to impress some change in young people. And you hear that from parents. They'll say to me, "Are you sure you brought back my child?" The kid that this is not the kid that left home.
Yeah.
It's somebody else. And that's not an indictment. That is excitement in families' voices. Hey,
Yeah.
you did something that we couldn't figure out how to do.
You
And
know,
you're
it's
allowed to be
interesting.
proud.
I run into a lot of families through Rotary, and that's how I typically hear about something. And so there's a couple of downtown members, like the downtown club, you know, has Camp Enterprise, and previous to me being engaged down there, I hadn't really been engaged with RYLA, and that's because in reality we probably haven't engaged with them. And I had a conversation just this past week that said, "Hey, my daughter went to camp 6 years ago and was sponsored by a different club." And it was literally like my kid came back a different kid. My kid was going to be successful because they were good, all the things you think, two-parent home. Like, what's success probably look like for a 17-year-old kid that doesn't have any adverse childhood experiences or trauma in their life? Going to Booker T and life is good and everything's happy, and money's not an issue, food's not an issue, some things like that. And said she came back a different kid. I said, what did that look like? She said she had purpose and passion and had a mission, and knew how to apply what she had learned. And I think that's important. Is it's a path, and making sure that kids have a. I talked about that with John Raines a while back. Like, it's RYLA is the foundation. Like, it really truly can be the foundation of what we're doing when you look at all the things we teach and touch. And if I would have had a mission statement at 17, I think I turned out okay, and so did you. But I think if I had a mission statement at 17, I probably would have been more succinct, or a little more tighter, with having a plan.
So,
And
so
I,
Matt, I didn't have a mission statement the first year I went to camp. And one of the things I committed to do was to do everything the kids were doing so I could
yeah,
get the experience. Well, I did end up creating a mission statement. And my mission statement was to take the four-way test and inspire its use in others. And I'm still doing that. I'm down to about my last 1,000 cards. I have 4,000 of them printed. But every week when we meet with the interactors, we give them an ethical dilemma and
yeah,
ask them to solve it and have to get it right under the four-way test. And they debate it. We don't debate it with them. We
sure,
might ask them questions, but my mission statement was to take the four-way test and make it a part of my daily life. Well, it's become part of the daily Interact program.
yeah,
It could be part of a daily Rotaract program. Kathy Bryant, who is my partner in Interact, and she's gone to RYLA, I think, 3 times now. Kathy did it as a club program. We gave the club some of the same dilemmas we gave the kids.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to see them struggle with the challenges. So yeah, I didn't have a big mission, but I have one now, and
Yeah.
it's youth and the four-way test. Now, how do we put that together, make that work? I don't know. I don't know if the kids we've worked on that with in 5 years from now will ever even think of that again. But I'll tell you what, they are asking their teacher about dilemmas, and the teacher is saying, well, apply the four-way test, figure out what you're going to do. Last one we had, they were, there's a question about cheating. I've got a credit recovery course, and I know that I can get the answers from my friend. What should I do? And the teacher said, put it up against the four-way test and see what you come up with.
Well, the four-way test, I mean, I think back to my early days as a Rotarian, and it was honestly like I just thought it was kind of part of the meeting, because nobody took time to really talk about it. It was just part of the meeting. And it wasn't until, honestly, Brett, probably until I became part club president there in Broken Arrow that we started talking about new member onboarding. And I said, well, what is do people understand why the four-way test exists? And it's, as a non-political bipartisan conversation or a non-religious organization, as in Rotary, we have to have some way to validate and vet folks of difference. When we have people that think differently, and as well as I do in Rotary, a lot of people, and agree, disagree. And the four-way test looks at how we engage and interact with people. And is it beneficial to all concerned?
Yeah,
And
RYLA is such a great place to take your Rotary skills and use them, practice them, and live Rotary. So,
yeah.
Matt, I can't say enough good things about what you and Ron do.
Well, we
and Tracy, I don't want to leave Tracy
yeah.
out too, because she carries a big part of RYLA.
Well, as we wrap this thing up, I will say, I'm always, as I've done this 22 times with folks, and looking at the folks that I've done this with, I am always very blessed to know that for me, Rotary is about the fellowship, and it's about the friendships, and it's about the people that are along this ride with me. And I say that we're together in this ride, because no one person is Rotary. No Rotary International doesn't exist without the local Rotary Club, and Rotary doesn't exist because of one club member. It's an organization, and it's a group of common people doing extraordinary things when they come together. And with RYLA, having a great group of chaperones like yourself and others, and having a great group of leadership team, and having others that I can stand there and say, hey, here's our agenda, here's what needs to be done, and to know that people believe in you and believe in the product, because they can see the product matters a lot. And you've been a huge proponent, a huge piece of the success we've had as a club, as a district, when it comes to our youth programs. And I'm excited to get some of that time you got to give back, when you're talking about your June 30 day there. But I also know that there's clubs out there that need a little bit more Brett, need a little bit more Matt, need a little bit more Mike. And I'm excited for us to be able to share why our program makes such a difference in kids' lives. And and your shirt says everything it needs to say. It starts with the individual. It starts with how I show up, not necessarily looking at the people next to me and blaming somebody else, or saying, well, I'm not on the youth service committee, so, well, maybe you should be. Like, change starts with you, and our youth right now is where change has to start. If we want to do some things better as a community, do some things better as a nation, or do some things better as people, our kids got to be along for the ride, and we've got to start building up our youth. And Brett, I have all the confidence in the world that you do that. Anything else you got to say?
No, looking forward to the next camp. Consider me registered. I think I did already turn in my chaperone application.
Yep, Brett's already there. Well, Brett, I appreciate you. I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for you as a Rotarian. And you guys, episode 23 will be coming at you next week. Have an awesome weekend and stay blessed.